Hi, friends, and welcome to Costuming in Color. We're a show dedicated to showcasing amazing costumers of color and the people that support them. I'm Gigi, a history buff, dabblist, and historical costumer.
And I'm Noelle, a costumer who likes to play both sides of the historical and cosplay world. Today, we're interviewing Anne from SilkenStitches.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you for coming on the show.
But first, some house rules. So, the first rule of CIC is that you don't talk about CIC.
No, the first rule of CIC is that you do talk about CIC. Talk about it with everybody you know and let them know. And also let us know down below who you'd like to see interviewed. We do have a form that is in the description of this for you there.
Awesome. The second rule is that kindness matters. Aside from that, there are no rules. So, Anne, where are you from originally?
So I'm from Illinois and just the suburbs of Chicago. Grew up here and lived here for my whole life and continue to do so as an adult. But originally, previous to that, my parents are from the Philippines. They both moved over here and they started their nursing careers here in the Chicagoland area, and they met here. And so I am Filipino-American. What was that, first degree?
Awesome. Where do you live now?
Still in the suburbs, of Illinois, just hanging out in the Midwest, experiencing all of the seasons in every extreme.
I feel like Chicago is a little bit of an exception to the like Midwest stereotype, though, because it's such a huge city and, it has its second city life of its own.
I would probably agree with that, but honestly, I haven't traveled too much around the Midwest, so I feel like all the oop, that's definitely us still, though.
Just one word: cosplay, historical, or both?
Both. Firmly believe in both.
What is the costuming scene like where you live?
It's pretty darn good. I mean, having the Chicagoland area around is really great because there are a lot of cons that are around this area, somewhere in Illinois, sometimes in Wisconsin. And I have traveled a little bit somewhere in Wisconsin, some in the Chicagoland area. And it's really nice because it's very diverse. It has a lot of different scenes. I have a lot of cosplay cons and stuff that are nearby, which are really great. And I haven't found a whole lot of historical specifically, but then again, I don't always look really, really hard. But you can always find Facebook groups of a lot of different people and a lot of just very different backgrounds. So I really like this area so far. But, I always want to travel to all the places that I know my friends are, like the different coasts and stuff, which also have really great scenes.
What is your internet handle and how did you choose it, or why did you choose it?
So my internet handle is SilkenStitches, and it was kind of a play on words just because, first of all, I like alliterations because they're always fun. When I first made my handle, it was because I was doing silks and silks dancing and all of that stuff. And I kind of wanted to be able to do sewing content as well as silks content. So I kind of combined the two so that I could kind of post both of them simultaneously or just interchangeably. I haven't really done very much silks content in a long time. It's been a long time since I've done silks, but I do still really like the aesthetic. I really like it as a form of exercise. And, it's always nice to be able to possibly go back to it if ever I want to post some silks content.
When you do historical, what time period and place is your favorite?
So this is such a cop-out, but I actually don't really have a favorite just because I tend to work in what mood I want to come across. I really my friend was like, hey, let's do a 1880s ball gowns. And I was like, heck yeah, let's do that. I like big booties and why not? And so that is what I went with. And then when we were trying to figure out another outfit that I wanted to do, I was just like, okay, well, let's go on Pinterest. It doesn't matter what time period. And I'm just going through my friend's Pinterest and be like, this one looks really floofy and fun. I'm going to do that one. So it doesn't tend to be a certain century or a certain silhouette that I like. It just tends to be what my mood is of what it is that I want to build. And that's what I'm going to go for.
Cool.
As far as cosplay, what type of characters do you gravitate towards?
So I haven't been cosplaying very long, and I don't make very many cosplays, but every time that I have done cosplay, all of the characters tend to be strong female leads and they're all people of color. And that was pretty much on purpose because Moana was my very first costume that I made, and I was just so epically moved by the fact that I was in a theater with my family and watching a strong brown princess who looked like me. And I was just thinking about the fact that if I were a child and I saw this, like, what an epic role model that could be. And I felt so strongly about, you know, loving Jasmine and Pocahontas and like all of these really wonderful brown princesses. And I just was so happy for the generation of kids and adults that were able to see a Moana. And I was just like, this is it. This is what there wasn't anything else that like really inspired me to want to make my own costume and fully dive into cosplay, even though I've been familiar with conventions and cosplay for a long time. But I was like, it needs to be that. And so my other characters, all of them have been people of color. And the fact that I'm consuming this media that has a decent amount of representation now, and I'm seeing such better representation, I'm just like, why the heck not? I have to do these really great women of color because it's just what I have to do now. That's where I feel most passionate about.
Excellent. How did you start in costuming?
So my mother sewed. It was mostly out of frugality, just so that they could not necessarily spend all of the money buying clothes and then just like making stuff, doing all of the hand-me-downs. So my mom sewed a lot when I was a kid, and sewed a lot of our outfits as well as Halloween costumes. I wish there was documentation, and there still might be somewhere in the world, of some of the Halloween costumes, which I deem my first cosplays. I did a Sailor Moon costume in Halloween one year, and then I did like an Eris from Final Fantasy VII sometime in junior high. I think it was amazing, but I didn't realize what cosplay was at the time. But I had always been around my mom sewing in the basement. And so I was always very familiar with the concept of making clothes, but I unfortunately did not learn from her. But when I went to university, I started taking my classes in theater. And one of the very first classes that we did was costuming and just all of the technical theater classes. And so when I started doing costuming, it was the easiest thing for me to jump into. I took to costuming like a fish to water. And I just instantly connected with it. And it was really easy for me to just jump straight into. And I was like, okay, no, this is the thing I should have done this years ago. So that's when I started sewing. And from there, all of my jobs that I did, I always worked extra hours in the costume shop because I just found it really fun. And then from there, as I was continuing my theater career in college, I saw a flyer for working at the Renaissance Fair. And so I applied to work at the Renaissance Fair just to like audition and be part of the cast. And then when I got on cast in like 2009, I started working at the costume shop that was there because it was part of one of the stages. And I didn't realize that there was like a costume designer and like a lot of entertainers that had costumes provided for them. And so when I started working at in the costume shop there, I wound up being the assistant for several summers. And that is one reason that I got into the costuming. And then from there, as I continued to work in costuming in theaters local to me, I met my dear friend Gwendolyn, and she introduced me to historical costuming as well as costume college and Instagram. And so that's when I started learning that there was a whole different world that I was also, going to be part of. And that's how I got into it.
It's super interesting that you say that you got into costuming originally because it used to be, and it used to be significantly cheaper to make your own clothes.
Yeah.
Not anymore, kids. Yeah.
Man, if we can speak about that a lot if we wanted to, but
yeah, costuming is not cheap. Like, no.
I wish it was easier and more accessible for that to be something.
It's like something happened in the like late 80s, early 90s, and fabric got real expensive or something. Like, I don't know what happened, but
Man, there's probably something about like the rise of fast fashion. I've seen enough documentaries about
Yeah.
how suddenly it's just so much cheaper to just buy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Fabric got more expensive and labor got a lot cheaper. So,
Yeah.
But on a happier note, what are your favorite parts of the clothing to make?
So I tend to really enjoy the actual making part of costumes. I don't necessarily have like specific garments that I really love. Most of the things that I really like are the things that sometimes other people may find fiddly, like gathering and bias binding and piping and point sewing, like anything that's kind of remotely technical. I really like doing that sort of thing because I don't know, it's always just a new challenge, like making corsets and precision sewing. It's great. It's really fun. Trimmings and things like that, all really fun. So I don't know. I like the making part of it, not necessarily like the cutting or patterning and stuff like that. I'll do it, but
I am dying to know if someone's going to come on here and be like, I really like cutting. Because I'll be like, do you like cutting? Wow.
It's like the best part because it's the most, it puts everything like in a neat line.
Okay.
You have your lines, you trace it out, you cut it out, and it's all pretty. It's not ravelly yet. It's not wrinkled. It's just this little stacks of like pattern pieces and perfection. And then once you start handling it, everything gets crazy from there for me. So I like that part.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. God,
yeah, I can respect that.
I hope that sticks in my brain.
See, and it's funny because I don't love cutting, but I like the cutting part when I'm working in the theater because usually I'm not the person that's drafting or draping the projects. So when I get to the point where I'm cutting, I don't have to worry about it. I just have to cut it correctly, even though, I still get anxiety about cutting things.
It hurts my hands. I have these giant man hands. I wear a size 11 ring. Like I have huge hands. And no matter how big of scissors I get, it hurts my hands to cut for very long. So I'm like, no.
That is fair. Do you do the spring loaded scissors at all?
No, but now I have something to research after this. Cool.
Ooh, they're a game changer. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, I'm gonna investigate that like pretty much immediately. What aspects of costuming drew you to this, or like why do you costume?
I honestly think that, especially since I came into this as a professional, don't quote me on that, but
you are a professional.
I mean, I guess that's true.
No, you actually get paid.
That's true. But since I kind of started hobby sewing, in addition to the fact that I was getting paid to sew, the reason that I started doing the costuming in truth is entirely community. So like when I was in part of Ren Fair and I saw what the environment was like in the costume shop, in just the Renaissance Fair in general, just the amount of community and camaraderie there was a really big draw. In the same way that when I would go to conventions for the Renaissance Fair to sell tickets, and I saw the cosplay world, like I saw it all, and I was just like, wow, this is a really, really cool community. And in the same way that like Gwendolyn would bring me to, she would talk to me about the historical costuming events, and she would talk to me about costume college, and she was like, hey, there is this event that's happening, do you want to come with? I'm like, heck yeah, I do. So in truth, it's all been about the friendships we got along the way, and just the fact that it was a place where nerds could gather. It was a place that people of a certain like mind. It was so cool too, because since I was coming to it from a professional standpoint, everything was very theater, but with this and everyone coming to it in the fact that they were passionate about history, the fact that they were passionate about their animes that they liked. It was all there was a fire there that I didn't always see in the professional world. So that community and that, coalesced into something that I was just like, I should probably be a part of this because it's fun here and it gives me warm fuzzies.
That's beautiful. That's what I have to say about that.
You guys are great. Like the whole community of everything is just, it's really unique and I like it a lot.
I agree.
I agree. I'm a little bit like, there's a little bit of anxiety and like broadening out from the organization I started with to other like forms of historical costuming and cosplay. But the community is really like, has been really inviting. So that's what makes the difference, I think, for me.
Mm-hmm.
What is your like favorite project, whether it's epic or simple? What is like your favorite project that you've ever done?
I'm going to talk about an epic project. So going back to my theater, one of the things that I did was a light up Glinda dress. And that one was a really big project that I remember when I was in the costume shop being like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Because that sounds really difficult. And so my draper at the time was able to take on that project and all of that stuff. And I was just like, cool, I'll be here for you for support. But man, does this sound complicated to try and do an entirely lit up Glinda dress. And initially we were supposed to send it out. We were supposed to send it to another place so that they could put lights in it, but then suddenly it came back to us because of all sorts of other reasons. And then because of a bunch of other circumstances, I wound up taking on the job myself, and we were already kind of short-staffed and we were running short on time. And I was like, okay, I guess we're gonna learn really, really quickly how to make a really epic ball gown that lights up a lot, controlled by other people. So that was interesting experience, and I think I learned a lot. And she looked beautiful on stage. She lit up and glittered, and it was really, really epic. And it was something that you don't normally get to do in theatrical theater, especially regional theater. And I felt like it was a lot of pressure, and however many maybe about 80 or 100 hours put into that dress alone. Not necessarily just by me, I had other people helping me, but that was my most epic costume I think that I've made. Will I put other elements of light in costumes in the future? Maybe not nearly as epic as that though.
Can I ask you, like, do you get specs with that?
What do you mean?
Like when they say we need this ball gown that lights, because that's a pretty famous dress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you get the spec document to tell you what to do and where to put the lights and stuff, or is it just like freehand it?
It was a big collaboration with me and the electrical. See, I don't even remember what his title is. It's terrible.
The guy with the lights.
Yeah, the guy with the lights. And I was just like, okay, how do we do this? And he was just like, okay, there are going to be, I think it was 81 points of light on here. Is that possible? And I was just like, sure.
So he knew like what and where they went and all that stuff.
It was mostly just like how many points of light he was going to be able to do. And it was mostly the biggest thing was where to put the battery packs and like what they were going to weigh and like how we were going to access them and like charge them. But he was like, there are going to be 81 lights in total. And I was like, cool. They're going to be 12 on the bodice and whatever else that is, like 69 on the skirt. Does that work? Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
So,
what is the silliest thing that's ever happened to you during an event?
This is one of my favorite memories of the Renaissance Fair, and it's kind of cheating because it's a Ren Fair, but I'm going to say it anyway because a lot of silly things happen there. There was a day that was very, very full. Like the entire Ren Fair was just kind of bottlenecking at buying tickets and coming into the gates because there were just hundreds of people who were outside in the blazing hot sun and just kind of not being entertained because they haven't come into the gates yet. So then we were given some instructions to have a decent amount of people go down and entertain them and talk to them. And they were also like, I was up at the gate talking to them, and I could just see the huge wave of people. And so we had this really great idea that all of the people that came down and were talking to all of the big crowd would convince everybody to get ready for the wave. We were going to do the wave. And so like we prepped the entire audience and all of that stuff. This happened, it was amazing. And so then the people at the top that everybody was able to see, including myself, were like, okay, everybody get ready. And then we got like 200 or 300 people who were waiting for their tickets to do the wave.
That's fun.
It was pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
It was one of the silliest things I think I've ever seen, and I'm like, this is great interactive theater.
What would your favorite costuming memory be?
I think my favorite costuming memory would be when I first dressed as Moana in my convention, the convention at C2E2. I ran into, I know this is totally the same as Erica, but I ran into a baby Moana.
Oh.
And she was like 4 years old. She was absolutely adorable and was very happy to meet me. And it was just so cute seeing her, and her brother was Tomatoa. And he had like little claw hands and a backpack that had all sorts of gold, props on it. And not only were they really cute, but the mom was really, really kind to me. And I was just like, hey, we're taking these pictures and like there's a little Moana group. Is it okay if I hold your kid or like, pose with your kid? And she was just like, yeah, take him up there. And so
please take my child.
Yeah, take my child. It's no problem. So that was really sweet. And I got a couple of pictures with her and they were very cute. But then the year after that, I ran into that same family again, and they were dressed in Critical Role fandom, which also I really appreciated because I had already started that fandom. But she was just like, oh yeah, I don't know if you recognize us, but we were the group that was Tomatoa and Moana. And she said that when the little girl really, really loved my Moana, and she was like, that was her favorite part of the whole con. I was like,
oh,
I'm so glad I got to see you guys again.
That's so sweet.
Training the younger generation, I'm saying. This is always my favorite part.
Yeah. What cons or events do you recommend?
C2E2 in Chicago is really good. One of my favorites, and a lot of people come from a lot of different places. And it's really big for cosplay, as well as there are a lot of like celebrities and fandoms that come. That's my main convention. And then I also go to Costume College occasionally when that tends to happen. Those are my two main focuses. Let's see if there are any other ones. The Renaissance Fair at Kenosha, Wisconsin is really, really wonderful. That's part of my origin story, and I go every year. That's what brought me to a lot of cosplay in the first place. And so I always tend to go every year, if not multiple times a year, because there's some really great cosplay there. And those are my three main places. I tend to be, since I do tend to run on the introverted scale of things, events are great, but sometimes overwhelming. So I have to choose carefully.
Yeah, Ren Fair seems to be everyone's gateway drug. And I think it's largely because, like, if you want to, you can disappear. And if you want to, you can not disappear.
Yes.
And you can also show up in jeans and a t-shirt and, like, check it out first. And then show up in costume. And also they're not strict.
Very much. Yeah. Like that's one thing that was nice, that with Ren Fair, there's not a whole lot of gatekeeping. Like every single patron is valuable in their own way. But again, you can completely disappear in the crowd, which is, some people enjoy being able to do that. And some people like being able to dress up. By the end of the day, they're like, you know what, the next time we come here, I'm going to dress up.
I have actually never been to a Renaissance Fair.
They're really fun. If there are any nearby you, I would recommend them.
So there is one near like where I grew up in Louisiana, but it's always so hot. It's like, why would I go out there in costume? Anyway, so that's my pet peeve, sweating in costume, sweating in my clothing. I don't want to sweat myself. So
if you like Ren Fair, but you don't want to be sweaty, which is me, Dickens Fair. Dickens Fair is for you, because Dickens Fair is like all the same people and like vendors and food and like fun as Ren Fair. It's during a cold time of year, so that's because it's Christmassy, so that helps you like with the heat problem. But also the clothes are a little bit more like Victorian, obviously, because that's when Dickens was there. So you get a wider variety of historically inclined clothes and less fairy clothes. So it just depends on, like, most people are both. Most people like to go to both, but it's an option for people who don't want to be like super hot.
So with Dickens Fair, if I can ask a question.
Yes.
What is the percentage of people who dress versus people who don't?
It depends on, I think, which one you go to. So I attend the one in like San Francisco area, and I would say it also depends on what day you're going, right? But it's about half and half, I would say. Like about half the people are dressed up. There are days when it's like 70% in jeans and a t-shirt, and I am guilty of jeans and a t-shirt. Like I show up, I don't really like hoop skirts, so I show up in jeans and a t-shirt all the time. But there are a lot of people in costume there. And then there are specific days that are like come in costume days where it's not like required or anything, but it's very encouraged. Weirdly, those never line up with when my guild goes. And my guild goes en masse usually. And there's a lot of members in the GPACG. So usually the percentage of people in dress goes up on those days. So, but it's the same thing as Ren Fair where you're like, go however you want to go and it's fine.
So would someone going in not the Victorian era be looked at funny at all?
If you worked there, yes. If you don't work there, no. Like people show up in like steampunk and like, so you're supposed to do it during Charles Dickens's life or when he was writing. And my particular era of love is slightly after that. And I have shown up in a like bustle dress, which is too late, but also people show up in like random goth wear, like whatever. So it's just a little bit of a like, let's just say darker aesthetic than Ren Fair, you know what I mean? Like if you're gonna dress not exactly like that, you probably are gonna be in goth wear or steampunk or something like a little bit darker. I don't know how to say that.
Oh, that makes sense to me. I like that. I want to go to Dickens Fair.
Well, I have a guest room. Please feel free to use it. Same for you, Gigi. Anytime you'd like to come, we can go to Dickens Fair. I love Dickens Fair.
Who is your costumer crush?
Okay, I have a lot, and I've limited myself fully in order to only say a couple, but I have three that I want to highlight. In historical realm, I really love Samantha of A Couture Courtesan. I find her work really, really inspirational. There's just constantly it's a feast for the eyes, all of her work across the board. And she does so much really beautiful historical reproduction, including like American Girl doll. And then she also has like really amazing witchy vibes, especially in the month of October, which is just comes right after my heart. I was actually really lucky to be able to meet her at Costume College in 2018. She was exceptionally wonderful and kind, and I just think that her work is really, really wonderful.
She has a level of technical excellence that I am very, very impressed with.
I love the fact that it's sometime at Costume College, Gwendolyn told me that she had like a drive-by run-in with Samantha because they were talking very briefly about double piping, and then she like had this whole little like situation of how to do double piping, and she was just like, yeah, it was just funny because we just had this conversation as we were like passing each other in the hallway. That's what you can expect from Costume
I'm
College.
literally this week gonna learn how to do double piping, so I'll be calling you.
Ooh,
yeah.
I think I could probably give you a rundown of how Sam told me, or Sam told Gwendolyn.
Yeah.
Told me.
Excellent.
Oh, yes, more. So more in the cosplay side of things, Noor of Nimble Noor, they are fantastic, and I love all of their content. They make really epic art. They just did a painted lady from Avatar: The Last Airbender, which was just so stunning. And I feel like they're just such a model of strength and perseverance. And they also speak really frequently about social justice and like colorism and all sorts of things that I find really, really inspiring. And it's just constant reminder of the fact that you can constantly use your platform for the things that you believe in the same way that V of Vicious Frockery makes really, really amazing costumes as well. Like all of their work is just very clean and beautiful. Like there's just technically very good, and execution is really good, including a bunch of different techniques that sometimes I'm not at all familiar with. Like they did a Wild Mother, which was oh, it's just so stunning, that had like felting in it and all sorts of just like really beautiful waterfall effects. And they are the same way. Like they like to be an important voice for racial and queer issues. And like I feel like I am constantly learning from both of them specifically about how to use my platform and whatever little voice that I have to speak about issues for the greater, a bigger issues in the world, and just activism through our art. And I just find it really inspirational. So those are some of my biggest crushes right now.
What is your theme song for sewing or crafting? Or if you have a playlist, what's on that?
I have less of a theme song and more just like 3 specific moods for my playlist. So either if I want to just be like really energetic and just like sing while I'm sewing, I'm going for show tunes and going for Hamilton, I'm going for musicals, and I'm going for pop punk. So all of the Panic at the Disco, all of that sort of stuff is just, I just really, really like that. Or if I'm more in like an emotional, I need to get into a certain mood, I really like a lot of indie music. The playlist from the Critical World is really, are some things that I really get into. And then if I need to not have any just music that's just very atmospheric, I go for a lot of lo-fi music. And there's so many playlists on YouTube that are just an hour long that is just like lo-fi music for witches or lo-fi music for ghosts. And so I put those on just to kind of like quiet my mind. And those are nice depending on what it is that I have to concentrate on. Like if I have to cut something or if I have to pattern something, it's pretty much always going to be lo-fi and no dialogue.
We talked a little bit about who your customer crushes are, but now I want to ask you, who inspires you?
So on a bigger, more worldly setting, I want to say, especially because sewing is so big in my world and my life, my late mother really inspires me because she sewed, like I said before, all of our costumes and our clothes when we were growing up. And unfortunately, I started sewing well after she passed away. But when I started sewing, and it came so naturally, and the fact that I pursued theater as well as just going into costuming, which, you know, is pretty unstable as a career option, I know that in like the back of my head that she would have encouraged me. She encouraged my cousin who went into theater to follow his dreams, and I know that that's what she would have said. And like occasionally I'll be working at my table and, you know, laying out a bunch of fabric, and I think about the fact that she would lay out fabric on like the kitchen floor and cut on the floor just tirelessly, just without any complaints. And so that is a big source of inspiration for just the whole sewing world. And as far as also inspiring in the here and now, like everybody that's part of our inclusion panel is really inspiring, just because we are a great bunch of voices that will always encourage each other. And but also like we're encouraging everybody else as well. The sewing community as a whole is really wonderful to be so accessible in an online way, and in a way that maybe doesn't necessarily make you feel like you're so isolated from the rest of the world. The fact that it provides such an environment of kindness and uplifting is something that is constantly making me just very happy that I can be part of it, because it's just a great place of positivity. So I try and think of all of those things to, you know, keep me inspired to keep on making.
For those of you who haven't seen it, I will link the inclusion panel down below. It's a good one.
Agreed.
How have you mentored or helped people along the way?
So right from the beginning, when I learned how to sew and I started working at the Renaissance Fair, the Renaissance Fair is full of a lot of young people, and a lot of young people who are volunteers or live around the area, and a lot of people who just don't really know what it is they're doing or are wandering around the Renaissance Fair grounds like during class. And then so we take them all and we're just like, come to a costume shop, come help us do the thing. So like right from the beginning, when I first started working for just costuming in general, there were volunteers who had never picked up a needle and thread before. So I just got thrown into the mix of just like, yep, teach them how to sew, teach them how to use a machine. And so I got really used to being able to teach people how to do things or, guide people through projects. And it was something that I really enjoyed at the time, as well as occasionally during the university training, especially when I was working in the costume shop. There would be people who would be having a difficult time. Sometimes it's easier to go to another student rather than a faculty member. And then every time that I've been in costume shops, if there have been new stitchers or volunteers or people who were interested in it, I tend to gravitate towards them just because I'm like, I can show you some things and like I can make it in a way. I have been able to figure out like ways to teach people that maybe they haven't had that approach before. And so I really enjoyed being able to be that mentor. With Instagram, I will have people sometimes reach out to me and be like, hey, I have this draping question, which I'm like, how did I become this person? Because I'm not really a draper, but I guess I am.
You are.
And so I just like help people with whatever problems or issues they have. Occasionally I'll go in and be like, hey, I can see that you're having some issues with this. Do you want any advice? And so it's been a lot of people who sometimes, just don't necessarily know that there may be a different way or a more efficient way, but it's something that I really like doing. And sometimes it's them reaching out to me, which I do always appreciate. I always like being able to help people, especially because they're like, oh, I don't want to bother you. And I'm like, listen, this is a project that you are doing the work on. I'm just saying words. So if I can help and be part of this project that I don't actually have to do all of the work in, because I don't produce very much media very quickly, but if I can be part of it for you, I am all about that.
Aw.
How do you think we can be better mentors for our community with like an aim to retain and recruit?
I think one of the biggest things, and I think that this is true for a lot of aspects of fandoms, things that we love, is to try and not gatekeep. And I think that that's something that is across the board. We don't want to discourage anyone from making something or discourage them from using whatever resources they have, even if it's not necessarily the traditional ones. I think it's important to remember that there's no right way of doing things. If you're doing the thing, then that is good. You're still going to keep learning from whatever it is that you're doing. So I think for us as mentors, it's nice to keep reminding people to not just do the thing, but to anything that's worth doing is worth doing a little bit of, or part way, as long as you're still moving forward. And all of us were beginners, and all of us didn't know the answer to whatever question. Like, there are plenty of aspects of costuming that I know nothing about, or things that I know that I don't have that strength for, or that affinity for, that other people would, but I might know a certain thing, some other aspect, than somebody else might not. It's just nice to be able to recognize the fact that we all have our own strengths and weaknesses, and we can always learn from each other. And also, like, just uplift each other and encourage people, even people who may not have found their community or their tribe yet. Like, it doesn't take any extra effort to tell people that they're doing a good job and that they are on the right path. And I think that just that encouragement and that inclusion from, people who are old hats or people who have just gotten into it, I think that that's always going to be better serve the community and keep people in the game, because they're going to get encouraged.
For sure.
Agreed. I've had people tell me, I can't believe you know who I am in my organization. And I'm like, I can't believe you know who I am. Like, but me just saying that I think your work is great, like, touched them in a way that I wouldn't have expected. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah. What is your favorite inspirational quote, and who is it by?
This actually kind of ties into the last question. The first quote that I want to say is from Kevin Smith, a comedian, and it costs nothing to encourage an artist, and the potential benefits are staggering.
Yeah.
I think that that's very true, especially as someone who grew up in a household that didn't always encourage art, and it's important to try and remember that it's good to be able to tell people that they're doing a good job, and they can keep making things, because art is art. It's subjective, and people want to make it, people like making it, and it's always good to just be encouraging. Yeah, so there's that one. And then I also really like, might be cheesy, but it ties in with Gandhi's quote of "Be the change you wish to see in the world." That's something that I've been, just that philosophy is always something that I have in the back of my head as far as what my voice is saying, what it is that I would like to encourage from my friends and my family. And it ties in the same way with create the art you wish to see in the world. I don't actually know if that one's a direct quote from somebody, because it's a similar feeling of Gandhi's quote, but that's the same sort of thing. I preach so much about representation in media and in movies and TV shows. And like, one of the reasons that like cosplay is so great, because you can become the art that you wish to see. And it's just nice to be able to see, yes, we may not necessarily be able to see as much representation, but if we keep on trying and keep on making the art ourselves, especially as people of color, like that is going to continue to be part of the narrative. And I'm a big fan of changing the narrative.
Agreed. I like that. If you could give new customers one piece of advice, what would it be?
My piece of advice would be find what it is that you are passionate about, and find what it is that works for you. Just because you are asked to do something, or if you feel like you need to do something because like other friends have asked you to do it, or it's something that you think is flashy on Instagram and like that's the trend that's happening. If it's not something that you feel passionate about, then it may not necessarily be the perfect bouncing off point for you to go for. Find what it is that actually speaks to you and something that's going to hold your attention, and come at it. And there are so many different ways to come at a certain project, and to come at it to an angle that is something that works for you. For me, I tend to need an accountability buddy, and that is something that works for me. I had a friend who encouraged me to be like, hey, I want to go to this particular event. And so I'll be like, cool, let's make it happen. So I know that I need accountability, and I know that like things like research and design is not my strong suit. So I have other people help me along the way in whatever it is that means for me. So yeah, that's my piece of advice. Find whatever it is that works for you, because we all work really differently, and we all can get to an end result of a finished costume in different ways. And it's always good to try and figure out what it is that works best for you.
If you have a message of inclusion or equality that you would like to send out, we would love to make space for that for you.
So I have a lot of messages, but I'm not always very eloquent with them. I usually have to think about them and write them all down. My biggest thought is that this conversation and these discussions, like the social unrest that is still happening, is going to continue to happen. And it's sometimes really easy to shy away from these sorts of things. And I would encourage people to continue to face them head on, but also in a way that's uplifting and inclusive, and never stop learning. Whether that is learning and keeping accountable yourself and your own privilege, because I've had to do a lot of that in the last year or so. And I encourage everyone to, face those privileges, face those, whatever it is where it is that you grew from, and know that you can do better. And if you keep on learning and you keep on listening to other people, that is really the most important part. That's what I have to say about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really nice to take a moment and just get to know you a little bit better. I also want to thank our viewers for tuning in. We'll leave a list of Anne Marie's information down below for you all to go and follow her on all of her platforms.
Please do give this a thumbs up if you like it and subscribe if you haven't. And if you have a customer of color that you think we should interview, use the form that we insert in the description box down below. And make sure you leave a little love for Anne in the comments. Bye, guys.
Bye.